Hello and welcome. So great to have you with us here for this Snorkl 201 webinar here on August 28th. If you're joining us live, great to have you. My name is John. I'm one of the co-founders of Snorkl, and I am wearing my snorkel. I hope that you are too, so that you're ready to dive in. If you're joining us live, feel free to drop a message in the chat. Let us know where you're joining us from. This is our third webinar this week. We've been having a lot of fun. And I know it's a busy time of year. So if you're carving out just a little bit of your afternoon or your evening to join us here, really appreciate it. And if you're watching this afterwards on our YouTube, excited to have you joining us to dive in. I was joking with my team. We call this Snorkl 201 as to try to share some extra sort of more advanced Snorkl ideas, some things that we've seen and talked to teachers about doing. Just make sure that you know some of the features that are maybe less apparent in the platform. But really, we've tried to build Snorkl in a way that's really simple to approach for anyone. And so whether this is new to you or you're really digging in because you've been using Snorkl for a while, really excited to have you here. And thanks for joining. Great to have you from Missouri. Hey, Sarah. Hey, Jenny. Hey, Matt from Michigan. Awesome. Great to have you here. If you are joining, feel free to drop a message in the chat. Also, feel free to ask questions as we go. I'm going to come back to that chat periodically and try to make sure that I can respond there as well. So with that, I'm super excited to dive in. In this call here, we have 30 minutes together. And what I want to make sure that we cover are some really more advanced ways that you can customize your Snorkl activities. Talk a little bit more about different ways that you can adjust and edit that feedback. I'm going to go a little bit more in depth with the writing tool, as I know the writing tool is new for a lot of folks. We just released the writing tool over the summer. I'm also going to go through and talk about Snorkl Coach and show off some of what you can do with Snorkl Coach. And then, of course, happy to answer questions, and actually would love your suggestions and ideas too. If you've been using Snorkl for a while on your own, feel free to drop something in the chat, and we'd love to learn from you as well. So with that, I'm going to start sharing my screen and get this up here on the monitor. All right, there we go. Great. So I'm assuming if you're joining here for this 201 Advanced Snorkeling call, you already have some idea what Snorkl does. We allow students to record and explain their thinking. We use AI to give them really immediate personalized feedback. You can choose questions from our library or upload and create your own. So I want to start with that piece right there of creating your own and show a little bit of some of the ways that you can further customize those Snorkl activities and really customize what students are seeing and experiencing for feedback. And so I want to start right here. I'm going to actually go ahead and I'm going to create a new activity. I'm going to call it physics. I'm going to add content to the whiteboard, and then I'm going to upload a question to the whiteboard. Snorkl allows you to drag and drop an image in or copy and paste it in. You can also type something on the whiteboard so that you set it up exactly how you want your students to see. Since this is more advanced, let me talk about one other feature here on the whiteboard that not everyone knows about. If you want to add an object to the whiteboard and make it into a manipulative for your students to move around, you can hit that manipulative box. And what that will allow is for when your students, when they're recording, actually allow them to move that around. Now, on this question, that might not be all that interesting. If I could make this a manipulative and allow my students to move this block around on their screen. But you could also imagine uploading, for example, an image of a ruler or a protractor or blocks, or you could even do this with text boxes. So you can make word banks and make them into manipulatives so that students can move those around as part of their response. Once you have that whiteboard set up, you can click that Done Editing button and then scroll down, and the AI will analyze it and set up an answer key for the question. Here, it's going to analyze the image. It's going to analyze the text for what we're seeing on the screen. And one of the things that I think makes Snorkl so powerful is your opportunity to customize what the AI is looking for in that response. And so here it's identified this as a high school science question. You see the question from the whiteboard. You see a description of that image and a step-by-step solution. One of the things that I want to call out that I think can make Snorkl really uniquely powerful, and I've talked to some really inspiring teachers about this past year, is ways that teachers are using Snorkl not just to support students on their normal classwork, but also to actually raise the bar for what they can expect for a student response. And so as an example here, what I've seen teachers do with activities like this is here, this is really about calculating the kinetic energy of this block, right? So, you could ask your students to do some calculations and show how they find that. But I actually might find a way to extend and strengthen this in a way that would otherwise be impractical in my class if this was just on a worksheet, right? So I might ask which of these measurements is not relevant to this calculation, and explain why. Like, the opportunity to ask further conceptual questions beyond just calculating an answer, I think is a really rich possibility. And of course, you might be able to ask something like this on paper as well, but to actually gather that from every single student and be able to give feedback on that would be an enormous task. And I know so often we end up actually reducing some of the cognitive asks that we make of students because it's really hard to give every student feedback on their thinking in the ways that we might otherwise doing, right? If we were sitting down one-on-one with them and talking to them about their thinking and what's happening in this question and making sure they understand all the ins and outs. And Snorkl gives an opportunity to ask those types of questions. And so as I share with you sort of my first suggestion for tonight about thinking about what are some of the more advanced things that you can do with Snorkl, my first one is this. Think about, are there ways that you can actually enhance and push students further in the types of things that you're asking them to do, because Snorkl makes it possible with that really immediate feedback, and because you get to capture so much more of a student's thinking and explanation. So that's my first big idea. The second thing I want to share with you are just the diversity of different types of ways that teachers are using Snorkl to do some really fun and interesting things. And so I want to grab another example here. I was down in Texas the other day visiting one of the big district down there, Prosper ISD, just outside of Dallas. And I was talking with a teacher, a coach, who was sharing with me what they were doing, having fun with their football coaches and using Snorkl. And they were putting football plays into Snorkl and asking players and coaches alike, both having fun with this, around like, would the different positions be here? Who would move where if this play was called? And questions like that. And I thought that was just such a really unique and interesting idea. If you happen to know any football coaches, to play around with some interesting ideas like that. You can do really visual things with Snorkl as well. The next idea I wanted to share was around how you can further customize some of the setup of activities, especially if you're doing something like a self-reflection. And so something else I've seen teachers use Snorkl for was like, share a highlight of your day. What was one thing that you learned? What was one thing that you wanted to improve? And so I've seen teachers do some really thoughtful reflections from students using Snorkl. And if you are going to do this, a couple of tips that I want to give for you. One is that when you click done editing on that whiteboard and set this up, you can, of course, have the AI sort of generate some criteria around what kind of feedback it's going to look for and what it should give feedback on. But you have the option, and I think many people don't realize this. If you scroll all the way down to the bottom of setting up an activity, under more options, there's an option here to actually turn off the scoring. And there's actually also an option to turn on or off the correctness. And so in a case like this, where students are doing some self-reflection, maybe we want them to have an opportunity to share really open-endedly, but we actually don't want them to feel like they're being critiqued on it. We might appreciate the feedback to ask them questions, but we might actually remove that correctness and that score. You can also make those correctness and the scores visible only to the teacher. So perhaps maybe you want to have some of that extra data, but you don't want students to have to see that. So that is an option. Again, this is when you're setting up an activity down at the bottom under more options. And you could do this on other types of activities besides self-reflection. I know I've talked to some teachers who actually, they want students really to focus more on that feedback and less on the score. And so Snorkl gives you those options to customize how that activity is set up. And so you can control what exactly students see. You'll notice the other piece of more options here is this AI feedback language. And so there's another really specific use case I want to share here for when you might use that feature. It defaults here to students' default language, meaning that when students submit their response, they're going to get their AI feedback in their default language. But if, for example, you are a high school AP Spanish teacher, you might prefer that students are actually getting their feedback all in Spanish, or a German teacher, all in German, whatever the language is, right? And so you actually have the option here to override students' feedback language. Typically, the way that students' feedback language is set is it's set on their account, right? If you haven't seen this before, you can customize it in that top right-hand corner underneath the profile icon, language settings. But if you, for example, are an AP language teacher or more advanced language teacher, and you want to override the student's feedback language settings, you can change that, for example, for your entire class so that every student on their response here is actually going to get their feedback in Spanish. And I actually can get them more of that exposure to some of that language and the opportunities to interpret that and apply it really meaningfully to their work. All right, so I just jumped through a bunch of different things. I wanted to showcase for you, how you can augment some of those activities on the whiteboard by increasing the rigor. I wanted to show to you how you could also customize what the AI is looking for and customize what students are seeing when you are giving them feedback. You can turn on or off that scoring and turn on or off that correctness depending on your use case, and you can even override that feedback language. So all these things, again, can be found in that activity setup portion of when you're creating a Snorkl activity. I'm going to jump from here into the viewing of student work and show you some more of the ins and outs there of viewing student work. But I'm going to just pause here, check the chat real quick. And sometimes when I'm presenting, I have a hard time going back and forth. So I'm going to just drop in here. Oh, awesome. Using it to show decomposing shapes and finding area. Love that, Jenny. Nicole, great to have you here from Houston. Lisa, good to see you. Okay, great. So I'm going to jump back over into my home screen. I'm going to navigate to a class here where I've got some student work. And I want to talk a little bit about some of the options that you have when viewing and reviewing student work. So here's my classroom view where my students have now responded to this Snorkl activity. As students are responding, this will pop up in real time, and you'll be able to see your student responses. You'll also be able to tell which students are currently online. There'll be a little green dot next to their name, and you'll also be able to see down at the bottom which students in the class have not yet responded. One thing that's really important to know is when students are going through Snorkl, we really encourage students to take multiple at-bats, to use that feedback right away to try to improve. And every time that a student submits a response, Snorkl saves that attempt. And so you will see those all here on the teacher dashboard. That is what this little number is in the bottom right-hand corner underneath a student response. So Chandler here, we are currently looking at Chandler's second attempt out of 2 attempts. And if I click on that, I can actually see either his first response or his second response. So you can navigate between every attempt that a student makes on an activity in Snorkl. Here you can see that Monique has tried 3 times. We're currently looking at her second out of 3. When you're reviewing student responses, you can also use the arrow keys left and right to just really quickly move through your student work. I'm just clicking on my keyboard here, left and right, and being able to review all of those responses. You may already know this, but just in case you don't, in addition to scoring that student work and giving students feedback, the Insights tab is where you can go to see the AI insights of trends from around the class. And so this will show you some of your top responses and student exemplars. It will also show you some of the mistakes that students are making and who's making those mistakes, so you know who you might support with small groups or intervention or pull for extra help. So I wanted to come to this page specifically because I wanted to show you some of the more advanced things that you can do here. The first is that you have the option to actually organize and sort these responses in a number of different ways. You can also toggle on or off their names and make these student responses anonymous. And so, for example, here, now when I pull this response up to the screen, if I'm going to show it in front of the class, this name has changed to Xanadu X-ray, which is not the student's real name, but it's one way of allowing for more sharing of that student work if you want to make those anonymous. So that's under the filters right there. The second thing I want to share here was that if you're looking at student feedback and student scores, and you ever want to make adjustments to it, there's a pencil tool here down in the bottom right-hand corner, and you can actually edit any of their feedback, and you can also adjust their score. And so as a teacher, this is only on the teacher side, right? We don't want students changing their feedback or changing their score, but as a teacher, you can actually override and adjust that feedback and that score for that student. And when you're done, press publish, and that will be saved and visible for the student. You'll notice down here at the bottom right-hand corner, there's also this little circle button. This will rerun the AI feedback for the student. So I can press this right now. It will regrade or rescore Chandler's work and give Chandler new feedback. This becomes even more interesting if you're making adjustments at all to the criteria for success. So for example, let's say I gave this activity, my students were getting their score and feedback on it. And I realized that halfway through, maybe this wasn't exactly what I wanted, or maybe, I actually do really want them to express the final answer as 4/5 instead of 8/10. They have to reduce that fraction. So I'm going to say students must express that final answer that way. All right. So now I can go back to my responses. And when I press that regenerate button, it is going to reevaluate that work based on my updated criteria. So you have the option to always rerun student feedback, rerun student scores. And you can, of course, do this actually quite quickly using your left and right arrow keys, just going through the class and pressing that button to rerun and get updated feedback for your students. So those are just a couple of sort of more nuanced features there around rerunning feedback, around sorting and organizing, and how Snorkl saves every attempt that a student makes. I want to make sure that we jump over to the writing tool to talk about that for a little while. And I also want to talk about Snorkl Coach. But if there's something that you have questions about or you want to make sure that we cover here, please feel free to drop it in the chat, and we'd be happy to answer those questions and support you as well. So I'm going to go back to the homepage. If you've noticed recently, we added the option to create writing activities. And so when you push that create an activity button, you now have 4 different choices here. The whiteboard recording, which is that classic Snorkl experience, record your voice and screen, and we get to capture all that rich student thinking. The whiteboard only tool just captures students' visual response. The audio only tool is exactly as it sounds like, just captures students' verbal spoken response. And then the writing tool is a little bit different than all the rest. The writing tool allows students to write a response, and it's not on a whiteboard, but instead it's in a rich text editor. As a teacher, you can add a question or a prompt. You can add additional sources. And then just like those whiteboard activities, the AI, you can set up an AI answer key or criteria for success, and the AI will use that to score student responses. I'm going to jump into a class here that has a couple of different writing activities. And I've shown this one before, so I'll show it again briefly, and then I'll show you some additional ways you can use this writing tool as well. So this is what a writing activity looks like for a student. Students see that question and prompt on the left-hand side. And on the right-hand side, they have a rich text editor where they can type a written response. This is really versatile. You could use this to answer a short question. This could be like an exit ticket. Maybe you only need students to write 2 or 3 sentences. It can also be for something much longer. And you can let the AI know what your expectations are around the length of the student's response, whether that's a paragraph, a page, 10 pages. So you have a lot of flexibility and versatility there. I wanted to share one other example of how you might leverage this writing tool. And so I pre-created an activity here, and I'm going to assign it really quickly so we can look at it together. All right, I called it 2 similes. It's really simple. On the left-hand side there, my prompt was write 2 similes and bold the comparison word. And so as students are working, you can add things like this where maybe you have an expectation around how they are formatting this. So my first simile here, she tiptoed into the room as quiet as a mouse. And then he ran down the street like a cat chasing a laser pointer. And we might have some extra expectations around how we want students to show or indicate their thinking in different ways. And then they can submit that and get that instant feedback. So my point here is you can do things that are really actually quite different than just simply writing a paragraph. You can have students respond in ways that are sort of unique like that. You could also, the other interesting way I've seen this used in talking to teachers is I was talking to a teacher the other day. She was a Spanish teacher, and she had put in some text in Spanish with several grammar and spelling mistakes. And her directions for her students were to correct this text. She set that up, and I'll see if I can do this really quickly here. We're going to make sure that this is set as a world language Spanish activity. Okay, great, there it is. Double check this criteria, confirm. And now when students try this out, they have the opportunity to actually try to rewrite this corrected version of the text. Just another creative way, interesting way of leveraging the tool to do these really meaningful things that might be otherwise difficult to replicate in class, whole class, with a large number of students. So we had a chance to jump into the writing tool. Oh, this time it's going so fast. We had a chance to look at that teacher dashboard and talk about some of the other features there. We had a chance to talk about setting up activities. And the last thing I want to make sure that we visit here is talking about Snorkl Coach and how Snorkl Coach works. And if you're not on premium and if you've never tried a premium account, you might not know a whole lot about Snorkl Coach. And so let me show you what that is. It's just sort of the basics at first, and then I can talk more about how you can use this with your students. So you can actually, anyone can try Snorkl Coach. If you have any account, free account or premium, if you are on that homepage and you see that try sample activity, all of these activities actually have Snorkl Coach enabled on them. So if you want to get in there and try out Snorkl Coach right now or right immediately after this webinar, you can go in there and try out Snorkl Coach yourself. Snorkl Coach is an extra tool that gives students extra assistance beyond just the AI feedback that they get after they submit a response. So let me show you what that looks like. I'm going to open up this middle school science question. And it looks like a normal Snorkl activity. And in the bottom right-hand corner, there is these little stars, and that little subtle symbol there is Snorkl Coach. And so Snorkl Coach is a tool that can actually see students' whiteboards. It can read the whiteboard aloud to the student. It can translate the whiteboard for the student in over 40 different languages. And they can also ask it questions. Snorkl Coach acts as a conversation partner to help students if they're feeling stuck or if they're not sure about what first steps to take. And our goal with Snorkl Coach is really to keep the thinking on the students while being supportive. And so you'll see here, it's going to ask me questions back. It asks, what information on the table do you think we would need to help you compare the gases? I'm going to say, I'm not sure, and just see what it gives me back here. All right, so it's saying, look at that table. This shows different properties for each gas. What are the properties that are measured? And so it's going to prompt students, support students, direct students. You'll notice that when Snorkel Coach is open, that record button disappears. And that's really intentional. We want students to get the support that they need from Snorkel Coach. And then when they're ready, close Snorkel Coach, and on their own, press that record button. And now Snorkel Coach is gone. And so we force students to synthesize their understanding in their own words, to articulate and explain their thinking, and not just regurgitate what Snorkel Coach is telling them. I was a math teacher for 10 years. And so I really believe in the power of productive struggle. And I'm actually a really big skeptic that students have enough productive struggle when interacting with an AI chat tool. I know that may sound surprising to you as someone I live in the AI tech space, but I also live in the classroom space. And I know how important cognitive struggle is it for student learning. And I also know that so often AI can actually accidentally undercut some of that really important cognitive struggle. And so at Snorkel, we're trying to take a different approach. We're trying to use that AI to give feedback on student responses after they've submitted their work. We're actually raising the bar for what we expect for students, asking them to explain and articulate their thinking. And if you would like to, you can enable that Snorkel Coach feature and give students some of extra support. And after they get that support, they still have to close it and share their thinking back, record their response back, and again, keep that bar really high for students. So that's what the Snorkel Coach feature does. Any conversation that a student has with Snorkel Coach is visible to the teacher. And so on the teacher side, what you'll see here is you'll be able to see their entire conversation is visible to you as the teacher. We will flag for the teacher anytime that the student uses it, makes a threat against themselves or against others, or is in any way sexually explicit. We'll flag that immediately for the teacher so that you know about it. And Snorkel Coach is really good about shutting that down and not engaging in that. So that's Snorkel Coach. The way that you can enable Snorkel Coach is when you're assigning an activity under the settings, you have this option, it's the toggle right there at the top to turn on or off that Snorkel Coach feature. Again, you can get in there and you can try that Snorkel Coach out. It is in the try a sample activity. It's turned on for all of these activities. I believe it might not be actually for the reading aloud, just because you might not want students to have the AI help them read that aloud. But you can experiment with that a little bit there and have fun with it. We find that it's oftentimes students who need that support will use it, and oftentimes students who don't need that support won't, because it actually slows them down from submitting their response if they are talking to this other AI tool to get the support. But really important if they need it. All right, I hope here that in the last 28 minutes, I've offered you something new, something that maybe you didn't know Snorkel could do. Maybe just a little kernel of idea. Maybe it was the manipulatives at the beginning, or thinking about adjusting the whiteboard. Maybe it was toggling on or off the scoring. Maybe it was some of those teacher tools and flexibility, or maybe it was even exploring how Snorkel Coach or the writing tool work. But I can't believe how fast this time has gone. But I've had a really great time. And I also want to let you know, like, we're here to support you. So if you have questions, if this sparked other curiosities for you, if you're using Snorkel in your classroom, or you're working with teachers in your school or your district and trying to support them, please feel free to reach out anytime. We love talking to teachers, and we love thinking about our partnerships with schools truly as partnerships where we want to be in conversation with you. If you haven't yet already created a Snorkel account, anyone can create a free Snorkel account. It's at snorkel.app, and you can sign up in the top right-hand corner. And as you're snorkeling, we hope that you stay in touch. We're super excited to be able to celebrate student thinking with you, to get our students talking and explaining their thinking more, to give every single student more personalized feedback. And we're really honored to get to do that with all of you. So thanks again for joining. Feel free again to drop a question here in the chat. And I hope you have a great rest of your Thursday evening.